Hey everybody, welcome to the first ever SARMLB Podcast. I'm Panda and I'm joined by Brig and Kelly, and some of you may remember that we used to do something similar for League a little while ago, and we decided to pick up something a little less intense by doing a podcast this time. And so we hope you guys enjoy it, and Bregan, it's good to have you along and get to relive our glory days again.
Yeah, it's good to be here. I was definitely missing our old radio shows, and it's good to be back.
So the first topic we want to cover for you guys and just kind of jump right in is one that's sort of taken a league by storm this year, kind of out of nowhere for a lot of people, and it's the waiver wire. So as we got into this, it was one of the most active times I think this league has ever seen when it comes to the waiver wire, and it just sort of took everybody by surprise. What were your impressions, Bregan, as you kind of saw everything starting to go down?
I'm not really sure if it was just by coincidence or people are just trying to have a little fun with our crazy commish. I mean, I've never seen anything like this. It's just ridiculous. Maybe people were just a little taken back from the holidays and didn't get around to trading guys when they wanted to because they were with family, which is understandable. I guess waiver's a good time to pick that up, but Commission isn't too happy about it.
Yeah, he was having some rants behind the scene. A couple teams that we really could point out and kind of question maybe a little bit of what they're doing. One would be Milwaukee. I think they put a lot of guys out there on waivers, a lot of good talent out there on waivers. It was kind of surprising. The second would probably be Toronto. You look at what they're doing. Again, another team that put a lot of people on waivers. But then, the best part about them is that half of their players were claimed by Milwaukee. So the two guys who were shedding contracts were then claiming each other's players, which doesn't make much sense. Then we have Las Vegas doing a similar thing. Las Vegas is leading their division, and yet they are putting other individuals on the waiver wire, good talent. And then you have Atlanta, who's also flooded the waiver wire with prospects. I mean, 4 teams that sort of took waiver wire to a whole new dimension, and really kind of maybe abused it in a little bit. I kind of just sat there and was like, what is even going on?
Yeah, and part of the reason for BB fan kind of getting a little irritated by is the fact that Milwaukee and Toronto are waiving all these players and no deals are being made. So it just kind of makes you wonder why they're even doing this in the first place if you're not going to follow through and make a deal.
Yeah, it's sort of interesting to kind of see the thought process behind it. I mean, can you imagine if you were any of these players on these teams? I mean, everybody just getting thrown onto the waiver wire, no matter the contract, just to see what you'd fetch. And I mean, I guess there's some strategy in it, but why would you want to be in Toronto? Why would you want to sign with Toronto or Milwaukee or Atlanta or Las Vegas or any of these teams that are sort of just dumping players onto the waiver wire just to potentially have this held over your head every single year? You could just be dumped out as bait to see what they can get for you, and you're just going to be traded to another team who's just going to dump you back on the wire again. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. And I feel like this might hurt these teams in free agency when players are trying to figure out where they want to go and what they want their future to be. I mean, am I wrong with that?
Yeah, and with this league's interactive free agent process, I can't even imagine what some of the conversations will be like between the players and the owners trying to potentially sign these guys. And I think you're right on the money, and you're saying I wouldn't want to sign with this team knowing that there's a good chance no matter how well I'm performing, if this team's not doing well, then I'm going to get axed anyway. And job security is something that they definitely look forward to in the negotiations.
Yeah, so I mean, it'll be interesting to see how this shakes out in the off season. See if there's any ill effects, and see if maybe that sort of curbs the expectations for next year. But on that same note, I think it's important to sort of realize that the commissioner has said that there will be waiver rule changes, and we have some league insiders who have given us a small glimpse into what those could be. Again, this is nothing official. This is sort of but we've heard coming down from the league office that might be. So why don't you just go ahead and run through what some of these things might be that might be in place as soon as next season and affect some of these teams in the way they're operating this year?
Well, firstly, as of right now, any bottom feeding team, the last place team can go and claim every single player if they feel like it. And that's helping them beef up their teams, but at the same time, it's hurting those middle tier teams that can put a claim on everybody. But if somebody below them decides they want them, then they can't get them because there's no reset. So the first thing that we're looking at changing here is resetting the waiver order. You got to think of a way to, maybe mend that if teams claim multiple players. But, if you claim a guy, then you get to move to the back. And that's how it should be, I think. Another one that's been proposed is you have 48 hours to make a trade. If you don't trade in time, then it's an automatic player gets revoked, and that's the end of it. Too bad. Third off, get 12 waiver requests per season. And after the waiver deadline, it lowers to 10. This covers all the waivers, the designated for assignment and revocable. And that'll definitely help with a lot of the mayhem that's been going on with teams, going and waiving 10 guys at a time and just doing over and over. That'll definitely calm it down and make it more realistic.
Yeah, and I think it will help to sort of curb some of the aspects of it that make it, unrealistic. It'll help to sort of simplify things too for the league office, and I think it'll help to actually promote more deals. If you have that 48-hour windows, instead of just placing guys on waivers and then when they're claimed just kind of nonchalantly not doing anything, these teams are going to be forced to be a whole lot more active. If you place 10 guys on the wire at once, you have to realize the consequences are that you will have 48 hours to trade those players once they pass through. You will have 48 hours to trade 10 guys. That's very difficult to do, and you're not going to get as much return, and you're not going to be able to focus on maybe your team needs quite as much. So I think that trade rule will definitely help to create activity by limiting the activity, sort of do both at the same time. So it's definitely interesting, and we'll have to keep a watch on it as we go into next year, but definitely some positive aspects that hopefully will help to correct some of the nonsense that's going on right now.
Something else that's been bouncing around is giving teams a set number of players that they can waive in a certain time frame. So say you can only waive 2 players in a 24-hour period, just so it's not, loading the box and taking some of the workload off for a commissioner to deal with, and won't be as overwhelming. And I think that would definitely help if implemented.
It'll be interesting. We'll have to keep our eye out on the league office this offseason, and also keep our ear to the ground and see if we can find anything else out for all those interested owners. And as we kind of move along, one of the teams that sort of you kind of got to question, they're sort of in the news as of recently. This has been an ongoing saga over the last several seasons, to my understanding. One of the teams is Minnesota. You just kind of wonder sometimes what's going on there. They have a winning record, but I mean, you just kind of got some chaos on the field, and the conflict comes in when they play Baltimore. So maybe you can walk us through a little bit of what's going on with that rivalry and just kind of how it's affecting both teams on the field and off.
Well, really it started with what we call the Twitter war heard around the world, which involved Javier Nunez, second baseman of the Orioles, tweeting out something at outfielder Ian Critella of the Twins, saying how he needs to be spending more time focusing on his game and not worrying about his reality show, just basically bashing him for not being as focused on his own gameplay. And of course, it just kind of kept going back and forth until Kevin Kiermaier of the Orioles came in and made a little threat to Critella, saying how Michael Pineda might have to pitch a little too far inside and beat him once or twice for him to get the message across. And of course, that caused a big outbreak. Got a bunch of players suspended and Twitter accounts deleted and all that fun stuff. And of course, when you got off the field drama going on, it's gonna translate on the field, which it has. We've had some minor fights break out, like the playoffs last season, and now just this season, you had Gratella supposedly going in, making a dirty slide on Nunez, started a little fight. Players got suspended again, and now it's just going around in circles. And both teams just need to grow up, realize what they're there to do, which is play baseball. Just calm down, both sides.
So how does this rivalry and what's happened on the field potentially impact both of these teams going into the offseason when you look at free agents, when you look at drafting, maybe not so much drafting, but especially free agents? How does this rivalry and knowing that you're throwing yourself into it if you sign with either team, how does that affect free agency for both of them this year?
Well, it really depends on who you're talking to, player-wise, and what they want out of their team. If there's someone that's ready to get chippy on the field when something's not going their way, then they're going to be all over it. If it's a guy that wants more sanity in the clubhouse and on the field against that team, then obviously he's gonna run away from it. So it just really depends on what kind of players you're targeting and their personalities and how they feel towards it.
On that same note, we're talking about Minnesota, Baltimore, the on-field brawls, that sort of intensity against another team. You sort of get that. You get that, there's all this adrenaline pumping. You get the, bad blood. He threw at me, I'm going to throw back. That's understandable. It's kind of always been around in baseball. But the other day, we had something going on in Kansas City that sort of bucked all these trends that originally were there, and we had a brawl at the end of the game. And originally you see that and you think, oh, it's Kansas City and another team, but in fact that wasn't it at all. It was just Kansas City against themselves. And maybe it's a product of a bad season or a terrible manager or whatever it might be. But this has just kind of rocked baseball a little bit, and everybody sort of stepped back and said, whoa, what's going on? I mean, we know Minnesota has their problems. We know Baltimore has their problems on the field with their teams, but this is just unprecedented. I mean, what's going on with these brawls in Kansas City against themselves?
I know losing can be hard on teams. They're on a 14-game skid right now. It's not looking good for them. But what they all did there, not just Stashak, not just Dixon, not just Posey, Moran, all of them for getting involved with it, it's just childish and just really not okay. The Royals were an irrelevant team before all this went down. Nobody cared about them, and now all of a sudden they're making headlines in a way that they did not want to make headlines. Stashak he's only 24 years old, but he's been with the team long enough that he's supposed to be a leader now, and now he's just kind of acting like a jackass, frankly. Instead of targeting teammates and starting crap in the dugout, he just needs to be assessing the issues in his own game, figure out how to fix it, and that'll translate over to his teammates. I don't see this being a recurring issue with this team, as this is just kind of sprung out of nowhere. I think everyone is back to their normal selves. It was just one of those, everybody was frustrated, fight ensues sort of deal. I expect things to quiet down from here.
Well, and I'm also interested to see, suspensions have been handed out by Royals management. Originally, they didn't offer a comment, which was kind of bizarre. But they came back and handed out some suspensions, which we could anticipate. I mean, they're essentially meaningless. This team's terrible. It doesn't mean anything. It's just, unpaid days off, essentially. It's a slap on the wrist for most of these guys. I mean, I guess in my mind, if I'm upper management, GM, owner, I mean, how can you allow your coaching staff, who is, I know losing's tough, but there are countless other teams that are losing just as much as the Royals, and yet their dugouts are not in complete chaos. I mean, it sort of lends me to think that maybe it might be time for a change in the dugout, a change in the coaching staff, or something, because, I mean, you don't just randomly get 20 player brawls. There's got to be some poor mismanagement leading up to this. I know losing's hard. I get that, but I guess it's just one of those things where, I would expect them to have to look at management and say, okay, something needs to change. Maybe we need to clean house and start over so that we can really begin to build this thing again.
Yeah, cleaning house is exactly what I would do right now. I think it's pretty obvious that AJ Pierzynski does not have control of the locker room right now, and that needs to change either by getting rid of him or some players that are causing issues. But I think it should be all of the above. Just get rid of Pierzynski, guys causing problems. No, just get rid of everybody. They're an irrelevant team. They suck. They can't win a game. Might as well just completely take out everybody and start over from scratch and see what they can make of it, because right now it's not working.
And the toughest part about it is that even if you clean house this offseason, you're going to have free agents that don't want anything to do with Kansas City. You don't have a draft until partway into next year to try to bring in any substance to help your team out. So I think if you're a Royals fan, you're just going, oh my goodness, even if they clean house, we don't even have a hope.
Really, the best way to show that you've moved on and you're ready to rebuild and show free agents that you're ready to stop this nonsense and get going is fire Pierzynski. He needs to go. Clearly, he doesn't have control of his players, and everyone else is starting to take notice of that. They fire Pierzynski, that'll be a good start. You got a fresh manager, get some fresh faces in the lineup. That's how you get the ball rolling, and that's how you get into October.
With that being said, it is time for one of our favorite segments. We're bringing it back, and it is our star and dunce of the season to this point.
You're killing me, Smalls!
We aren't doing the week because it's been a very chaotic week with the waiver wire, and there's a lot going on, but we're going to do, for the season to this point, going forward, your star and dunce of the week. So, as always, we love to rip on guys, so let's start with the dunce of the week, why don't we? Bregan, who is your dunce to this point?
Killing me, Smalls!
Well, up until this point, I would have given it to the entire Royals organization, but now after what's gone on in this last week, I'm ready to put all the blame on Joe Stashak. Just recently, he started a 20-player brawl in the dugout and just made a mess of himself. And he just needs to grow up a little. What he did was unacceptable, and it's put a bad face on the Royals franchise.
Yes, it certainly has. My one question as I look over this story again is, how do you break an eye? I mean, the story says he had a broken eye. Does that mean a broken eye socket or just a broken eye? I'm really interested to see how this
Well, obviously I didn't write it. I mean, maybe he had a glass eye and he just took a shot and it just shattered in his eye socket there, and now his eye's broken. You know.
Breaking news: Kansas City is so bad they can't get free agents, so they're hiring guys with glass eyes to go and hit for their major league team. You heard it here first.
Killing me, Smalls!
Well, along those same lines, my dunce to this point would be Crotella. Honestly, he's a very young guy. I get the attitude about him. I get that you want to play with some spirit and you want to play with sort of that, attitude that you're the best and everything. But I think he's really taken it to an extreme. And I think he's got to prove himself a little bit more before we look at this guy as a legitimate player in this league. And I think his actions right now are what are defining him. But if he just shut up and got in the batting cage and stopped horsing around, he could become a much better player. And I think the reason he's the dunce is not because his stats aren't that great. It's because of what his whole air is around him. And he's going to become a guy that people don't want in a locker room. And I think that's a sad thing because he is only 21 years old and he's got a very bright future ahead of him. But unless he sort of gets himself straightened out to the point where he can curb that edge that he has, curb that sort of air about him to at least is somewhat controlled, I think we're looking at almost like a DeMarcus Cousins, if you want to compare out of the NBA, where this guy just has no censor, he has no control over his actions, and he just goes off. And that's tough for management, that's tough for the owners, and that's going to be tough to deal with in a locker room if it continues. So for those reasons, I definitely got to give him the dunce.
Yeah, and really, I think what he's trying to do is he's just trying to be that, league badass. He wants to be that DeMarcus Cousins. He wants to be that Bryce Harper, but he's not. He's still a kid. He still has time to change himself, and he was actually doing pretty good up until the latest debacle with the Orioles and the Twins whole on-field brawl where he slid into Nunez, and whether or not it was a dirty slide is here nor there. He's just always popping up in the headlines, and I thought he was doing better. Now things are just starting to go downhill again. When he's putting up the best numbers of his career and people are still dogging on him, that's how you know he is a locker room cancer.
Yeah, absolutely. He's hitting much better this year. He's finally starting to show signs of, hey, this might be a guy that you want on your team from a production standpoint, posting his best average by almost 30 points. His OPS is up about 150 points this year. His home runs are up 10, and he's got about 130 less at bats. His strikeouts are down this year as well. And it's just he's playing better defense. All across the board, this guy should be, being talked about as this up-and-coming star, and yet he's not. And it's all because of his on-field, antics and his in the clubhouse antics. So I think it's something that he's going to have to consider how it may negatively affect him the rest of his career. And hopefully he gets things straightened around before that 3-year deal runs out and he finds that nobody wants him around. So we focused on the bad people and our dunce to this point, and now I think it's time to more focus on the good things. We've talked a lot about the chaos with Waiver Wire, the on-field rivalry, the KC Brawl, our dunce, but there are some good things going on for some teams that are sort of staying out of the spotlight because they're not doing horrible things on the field, crazy things in the front office. And so go ahead and why don't you give us your star to this point?
Yeah, even during the darkest times of this league, there's still that light at the end of the tunnel. And right now, that light is the Philadelphia Phillies. Right now, they're on a 10-game win streak, just pulled within one game of the NL East with a very, very strong Pittsburgh Pirates team, arguably the best team that Waller Crawler has put together there. And over this 10-game winning streak, Manny Machado's turned into a MVP candidate, hitting over 600. And right now they have 4 players hitting 300 plus on the season. I think that's something to be proud of. So good job to the Phillies and to Doc for turning this team from a solid wild card team into a serious pennant contender.
Yeah, I would agree that my star would be similar. I would give it to the Pittsburgh Pirates and the Philadelphia Phillies for this National League East battle that we have going on. It's one of those that I think will continue throughout the season and hopefully will be something that we can watch all the way down to the end. I'm really excited to see how this turns out. We'll give our predictions here in a little bit, but for me, this has just been the highlight of the season. Amidst everything that's been kind of chaotic, we have this awesome race that's getting like 0 headline time. And so hopefully here, as we come down the stretch with, not too many games left to play, we'll get to see a little bit more of this sort of take front and center stage with the waiver wire being over and really give it the space it's due, the front page news that it's due. So that would be my start to this point, and start moving forward would be to keep your eye on the National League East to see how this whole deal breaks down. I think it's going to be pretty cool when it's all said and done.
Put that candy back. I'm not buying you all that mess. Oh, try me, bitch.
It is now time for Buy or Sell, one of our favorite segments where we either buy a team, buy their stock, meaning it's going to go up, or we sell it and put it back on the shelf. But we're going to start in the National League East. We've been talking about them a little bit. So, Reagan, are you buying or selling the Pittsburgh Pirates, and are you buying or selling the Philadelphia Phillies?
Well, right now, Panda, the Phillies are easily the hottest team in baseball. Like I said, they've won 10 straight. They're just barely losing out to the Pirates, 1 game back. But I've just think that the better team is ultimately going to win out here. I think the Pittsburgh Pirates will win the division by 5 games and just in the end overpower them. But look for the Phillies to definitely do better here in coming seasons. But I am buying the Pittsburgh Pirates and selling the very hot Philadelphia Phillies.
See, I would do it a little bit differently. For me, I would buy the Philadelphia Phillies and sell the Pirates. And for me, when we get down to this point in the season, it almost doesn't matter what you've done to this point. It's about who's hot at the right time. You know, you can go into the playoffs with the best record, but if you're not hot, that wildcard team could just, kill you in a 7-game series and win it in 4 or 5, and you look around and say, what happened? So for me, I'm going to take the hot team. I'm buying the Philadelphia Phillies. Their 10-game win streak, I think that continues. I think that they pull away from the Pirates, and I'm selling the Pirates. Now, as we move to the NL East, are you buying or selling the NL Central, are you buying or selling the St. Louis Cardinals to be a true contender in this year's postseason?
Well, after last season where they ended up winning the World Series, surprising the Pirates and I believe the Phillies, they've beaten the playoffs too. After that, I gotta say it, the St. Louis Cardinals are a very scary team. I think that they'll definitely be up there playing for the pennant and possibly repeating as world champs.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I think when you put their track record and you factor in that management has been here before, most of these players have been here before, I think it would be very smart to buy this team, buy their stock, and make a reasonable prediction that they're going to be right there in the mix to make another World Series run. So we're going to start in the American League East. Are you buying or selling the Baltimore Orioles as the best team in the East and the best team in baseball to make it all the way to the World Series, if not win it?
I might be a little biased here as
just a little.
The fact that I own the Orioles and run them. But you know what? I'm a little cocky. I'm feeling good. I challenge any of those teams below us right now to beat the Baltimore Orioles because I don't think it's going to happen. I think that we're going to win our 3rd straight pennant, and yeah, that's about it. Come at me. Looking at you, Hal.
So moving on to the Central, we actually have a 6-game race here in the Central, Chicago White Sox and Minnesota Twins. Who are you buying and who are you selling between Chicago and Minnesota?
Right now, the White Sox are hot. They just came off a 3-game sweep of my Baltimore Orioles, who I was speaking so highly of. I think that they are the 2nd best team in the AL, and I think they will go on to win the AL Central.
Yeah, I think Minnesota to some degree is a pretender, and in this case, it isn't really is there, but not really. The runs scored is just not, they don't score enough runs to be a true contender. I think at this point in time, any team that's not scoring hasn't scored at least 700 runs, isn't really in true contention. So they have similar runs against, but that offense just isn't quite scoring the runs, and so I think while they're a good team, they're not a great team, and I agree. I'd sell Minnesota and think Chicago will probably walk away with this race pretty handily.
Having your number 1 hitter, Jose Abreu, only hitting .274, you're not going to be able to produce when it comes postseason time. Obviously, you've got some media issues right now. Got some problems with Cretella and a couple others. But right now, they just need to figure out who they are as a team. Are they going to be the bad boys, the Pistons of the MLB now, or are they going to cool off and just focus more on winning and coming together as a team and finally making that push at the end of the season?
Yeah, I think it's important to note that because while we may not be buying them to win the Central, they do have a somewhat of a shot at the wild card. Right now, there's sort of a 3-team race. We've got the Tampa Bay Rays, Minnesota Twins, and Los Angeles Angels. Which 2 of those are you buying to make it into the postseason, and which one are you selling?
I'm going to have to give it to the Rays and the Twins this time. Sorry, Panda.
Oh, that's all right.
My reason being is the Angels just don't have a good enough. I mean, this is your first year, full year on what was supposed to be a solidly long rebuilding project, and now you're 2 games out of the wild card, ready to push it in, but your bullpen's holding you back right now. If it's tied or you got a small lead going into the 6th, 7th, 8th, you know you're gonna end up coming close to blowing it, scaring the fans a little, or just blow it entirely. And that's not good for playoff time. You want to have a solid bullpen that's ready to come out and shut down the opposing team right off the bat. They just don't have that right now. Give it another year or two, I think the Angels are going to be arguably the best team in the AL, if not the MLB.
Yeah, I think I agree. It's sort of been, just because I've been checking constantly and sort of watching this race, I'd have to buy the Rays and the Twins too. I think the Twins, part of it is they are just in an awful division when you get past the Chicago White Sox. And when you're playing the San Antonio Bandits, the Detroit Tigers, and the Kansas City Royals 19 times a year, I mean, my goodness. Of course you're going to rack up the wins. So maybe while on paper the teams are fairly similar, Los Angeles just has a much tougher road just to get to that point to kind of push in versus Minnesota. And the Tampa Bay Rays, they're just a stronger team overall. They hit better. Their pitching is just as good. So, you know, they're probably quite a bit ahead of the Angels as well. So while I would love to see the Angels sneak in somehow, some way, I definitely think that the Rays and Twins are 2 I'd be buying, and I'd be selling the Angels. With those top 3, 2 of them presumably being the guys that will make it in, we have the Yankees and the Red Sox about 6 games back each from this wild card. If you had to buy or sell them to get into this wild card to somehow sneak away in, which one would you be picking?
I'd be buying the Red Sox all the way, because even though their former owner now runs the Milwaukee Brewers Windy City, he put together a great squad there with a lot of team-friendly contracts. They haven't left. They won back-to-back AL East titles, and last year they snuck into the wild card. I think that they can get hot at the right time and make that push and sneak in yet again. I don't see the Yankees holding up. I think that they'll falter just like they have last few years, and I'd have to buy the Boston Red Sox.
Yeah, I agree. The Yankees are currently, they've lost 6 in a row. They're 4-6 in their last 10. They've even got a minus 45 run differential. They've only scored 593 runs. They haven't even cracked 600. To compare that, most other teams that haven't cracked 600 are well below 500. We look at the New York Mets. They have 562 runs scored, 711 against. Similar numbers for New York, and yet, you know, somehow they're 15 games above 500. So I expect the Yankees to continue to falter. It'll be a quick and hard fall from grace. And the Boston Red Sox, if anybody has a chance to sneak up into that wild card game, it's definitely going to be Boston.
I think that pretty much wraps it up here tonight. Yeah, I think it was fun to do this, get back into the swing of things. Hopefully we can make this a weekly thing. Right now it's Wednesday night. It'll probably come out sometime on Thursday. When it comes out, I'd love to see what you guys have to say. Leave some ideas, some suggestions, trash talk, whatever, in the comments section. We'd love to hear what you guys have to say about it.
All right, thanks everybody for listening. Have a great day.